Joining us now is the aforementioned Matt Stoller, who of course works at the American Economic Liberties Project and authors the Big Substack newsletter. Great to see you, sir.
Good to see you, man.
Hey, good to see you.
So there has been this ongoing situation of billionaires publicly pressuring Kamala Harris to oust Lina Khan, of course, FTC commissioner, who has been instrumental in the antitrust direction of the Biden administration, which is your bread and butter. The most recent part of this saga that I'll start off by getting you to react to was Jake Tapper actually had one of those primary billionaires on, Reid Hoffman. And to everyone's surprise, he did a good job of holding Hoffman's feet to the fire over these demands being made. Let's take a listen to how that exchange went down.
You and other big money donors are giving money to Vice President Harris, suggesting also that she replace the head of the FTC, which impacts policy and the economy. What do you say to somebody who watches this and says, this isn't how American politics should work, rich people getting to buy levels of influence?
Well, I totally agree with not buying levels of influence. I separate my role as a donor and expert. So if you ask me as a donor, I say I'm giving money to Kamala Harris because I think she's the best future president for the U.S., for business, for a bunch of other things. If you ask me as an expert about what, kind of Lina Khan is doing and whether I think she is helping or hurting America relative to your anti-merger policies, which are, mostly to bring litigation versus, really solidly grounded in kind of what's going on, what helps American business thrive here and overseas, then I give an expert opinion. But I think donor and expert should be kept separate. And I've never tied the two ever in any conversation anywhere I've ever had.
Right. But I mean, that world doesn't really exist where people say, OK, now I'm talking to Reid Hoffman, the donor, and Reid Hoffman, the guy with political ideas, I'm going to put into the other room.
When I speak to these things, I speak more as a venture capitalist. I never speak as a Microsoft board member.
But there aren't there aren't like 100 Reid Hoffmans. It's not like one of you is a donor and one of you has opinions on Lina Khan and one of you is on the board of Microsoft and one of you is a venture capitalist. You're all the same guy.
Of all of Biden's appointees, J.D. Vance is most enthusiastic about Lina Khan, and maybe that has some, swing voter implications. And maybe also, I've also gotten a bunch of feedback from, a bunch of people I deeply respect within the Democratic ecosystem saying, well, we're much more positive than you. And I'm like, look, I love what she's done on anti-competes with employees. I dislike what she's been doing on, and I think it's bad for investment on kind of antitrust and investment.
So Matt, before I get your reaction, if you could just specify which identity of Matt Stoller you're going to use in order to give this response, because apparently, what did you make of this exchange? And give us a little bit of like the backstory of how we got to this place of Jake Tapper asking Reid Hoffman these questions.
Yeah, so the Biden administration has done, it's kind of mixed in a lot of ways. They've kind of continued the neoliberalism of the Democratic establishment, except in a couple of key areas: industrial policy, trade, and antitrust. So sort of taken on big corporations, kind of. And the main people in that, there's been a couple of regulators who've been the leaders in that. Lina Khan at the Federal Trade Commission is kind of the most famous one. And so you have a lot of anger from Wall Street and from Silicon Valley oligarchs about this because they want to do their consolidation of corporate power. Reid Hoffman is a leader in this area. He was a founder of LinkedIn. He is actually part of a network called the PayPal Mafia. This is a bunch of billionaires in Silicon Valley that got their start at PayPal. This includes Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, and then there are some liberal ones. Reid Hoffman is the Democrat, and he is a big donor to the Democrats, longtime donor. And so what they're saying, they hated Biden because Biden was preventing them from consolidating power, which is what they really wanted. And so some of them moved to Trump, and some of them sort of participated in trying to push Biden out and now trying to kind of buy Kamala Harris. And that's what Reid Hoffman is doing. He gave a lot of money to Kamala Harris's super PAC, and they're trying to say, look, we love you. We think you're great. Push Lina Khan out, get rid of this new trade, industrial policy, tariff thing, and antitrust thing, and we can go on and return to the great days of Obama and Bill Clinton. And that's what this is really about.
And so how successful do you think how successful does that campaign look so far? Is she receptive to it? What have the leaks been like? I know you've been highlighting some Wall Street quotes. What do they think?
Yeah, so the Wall Street mergers guys and Silicon Valley oligarchs are super happy. because they think that they own Kamala Harris, and they've been giving her orders. Her advisors are people like Aaron Dunn, who's a Google lawyer and a Qualcomm lawyer, is actually leading the case against the government on Google's monopolization claims. And she's also helping to prep Vice President Harris for debates. And then Tony West is one of her close advisors, also her brother-in-law. He's the general counsel of Uber. Her niece, Mina Harris, worked at, I believe, Uber and Slack and Facebook. There's, this network of people that she knows and has are very close to big tech, very close to Wall Street. So I think there's a pretty good chance that she does get rid of the antitrust enforcers, that she does try to return us to a kind of neoliberal frame on trade. I mean, they think they own her. I don't think that's quite that stark, but I think they have a pretty good, she just kind of agrees with them, I think, in a lot of ways. And so the only question is, are the parts of the Democratic coalition that want more populism, are they going to stand up to her? They didn't stand up to Obama. Are they going to stand up to her? That's the only question.
Yeah, and let me dig into that, because it's not like Biden had some great reputation as some like opponent of Wall Street and corporate America, right? He was famously known as the senator from MBNA because of his coziness with the credit card company. He did all kinds of terrible things with bankruptcy law that Elizabeth Warren was fighting him about, et cetera, et cetera. So how does it end up that that guy, who has no track record of populism really to point to in terms of his lengthy tenure in the Senate and was part of the Obama-Biden administration, how does that guy end up being the guy that brings in Jonathan Kanter and Lena Khan and does industrial policy, et cetera? Because I think part of that is the behind-the-scenes pressures, if I'm not wrong, that have been brought to bear on the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's part of it. But I also think, I did a bunch of interviews right before Biden took office, just talking to his crowd. And Biden always saw himself as kind of a foreign policy guy. And he was the senator from Delaware. And he's like, look, I have to represent the credit card companies because those are my constituents. But that's the job. But he always had this kind of resentment towards elites, in particular, like Ivy League elites. He hated the Silicon Valley guys. He always thought the Wall Street guys looked down on him. His people were more like the cable guys, right? And the people in the industrial parts of the economy that like make things. And there was a resentment there. Now, you wouldn't necessarily have seen it a lot in his track record, although Stephen Breyer, when he was overseeing him, he was the head of the judiciary, and Stephen Breyer was coming up to the Supreme Court, Biden did call him an elitist. So culturally, Biden was kind of like set. He's also old and understood the world before neoliberalism. And so Biden was, in some sense, he had a mild streak of populism there. And then I think he saw what Trump had done, and he said, look, the Democrats have to move in a different direction. Kamala Harris is just not like that. While Biden's cultural people were kind of like this resentful, they had a sort of chip on their shoulder types, I think Kamala Harris is much more comfortable with the whole Obama world, very smooth, very tech-friendly, very much like very corporate. That does not say, she might look at the same situation and say, I agree with Biden, we need to move in a more populist direction. She might say that. She's also just a lot less substantive than he is. She does not have a particularly, unlike Obama, unlike Biden, she just doesn't seem to care about policy for good or bad. So it's a different character. And I maybe she just is like, whatever. I don't want to pick fights with those, with the populists. I don't know exactly what she's going to do, but everybody's surrounding her, and her whole kind of, cultural milieu, her friends are going to push her in a really bad direction. On the other hand, she's not an ideologue. Like Obama was a very strong ideologue.
Yes, right.
Like we have to help the banks. We have to help Silicon Valley.
Right.
That's how America great. And that's not what Kamala Harris thinks. So it's a little bit uncertain. But I'm not super optimistic about the direction that she's going.
Matt, one thing that I've been thinking about, I saw someone positing this on Twitter, I want to run this by you, is that, the Reid Hoffmans and other billionaires who are pushing this like oust Lena Khan thing, they made kind of a tactical error by making this such a clear public litmus test from the jump. Because I've seen, groups and senators organizing online to push back and say, and labor unions, Elizabeth Warren, those types saying, no, Lena Khan needs to stay, she's doing great work, et cetera. And so having this done publicly like in front of everybody's eyes has been a bit of a mistake in terms of their actual goal, because this would be the type of thing that normally would be handled better in a back room at a donor meeting, et cetera, and she gets pulled before there's any attempt to marshal a defense of her. I wonder what you make of that.
I think that's right. I mean, a lot of unions have come out and said, look, we like what Lina Khan is doing. We want to maintain the tariffs and so on and so forth. And so that makes it a lot harder for Harris to do. If Harris did want to change direction, it would make it harder because a bunch of people have said, no, we like this. And so she'd have to pick a fight to do it. So that is certainly true. But I would say there's another part of this, and which is when a big donor comes out and says, we want to get rid of tariffs and we want to, we want dominant corporations to do whatever we want, and we own this candidate, it opens up a huge political, and Kamala Harris didn't disavow it either. Like, they've asked her campaign, and her campaign is like, well, we have no plans to get rid of Lina Khan at this time. Not
right,
good.
but that's
like,
not a denial.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that is a huge vulnerability if Trump picks up on it, because Trump, I mean, he's not running a populist campaign, right? Steve Bannon is gone, and we talked about this a little bit, but like, she's hugely vulnerable to being turned into Hillary if Trump does pick up on this stuff, because it's like crazy to be like, yeah, I'm, Silicon Valley billionaires are demanding that you sell out the country and you won't take a position on that. That looks really bad, and she's really lucky that Trump is so off kilter and unable to pick up on it.
But isn't he also vulnerable to the same charge? I mean, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk are all in. The other members of the PayPal mafia are all in for him. Elon Musk very publicly, he said he was going to give $45 million, and then was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But it's very clear Elon Musk is running Twitter for Donald Trump and the Republican Party's sole benefit. So isn't he also open to those charges?
I mean, sure. Donald Trump is open to the charge of hypocrisy. That's right. But I just think it's opening up a vulnerability where she doesn't need to have one, and that is solely due to Reid Hoffman. I mean, Reid Hoffman is fostering us. This is a real risk for the Democrats that Reid Hoffman has opened up. Big donors are. I don't think big donors. I mean, that's what Jake Tapper said. Doesn't this look bad? Big donors are not. I don't think they should exist. But it was a really huge. I think you're right. It's a tactical error. It's a strategic error. But it's also just really dangerous for him to do that to the Democratic Party and just make his demands.
Yeah, I think that's all very well said. Matt, it's always great to have your insights into these things because, I mean, one of the difficulties with Kamala Harris is, like you said, she's not an ideologue. She's been all over the place. Her rhetoric now on certain things, sounds good, but you have no idea what she actually means at any given time. So trying to read those tea leaves is really important. So thank you for helping us to do that.
Good to see you, man.
Hey, good to see you guys.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.